Alright guys, hello there, it's Midway here. So today I bring you this video where we're gonna be going over this Necrotic Wave plus 20. In this video we're gonna be talking how we handle some cooldowns and little things that we think about like whenever we engage with certain packs. And we might just like highlight things that might be useful or important and take into consideration on different parts of the dungeon. So for this first pull we always do it big, we always pull like a pack to the left, a pack to the right, and then we go ham on the guys in the middle too. So we usually just want to pop wings here and just add as much damage as possible. This pack is usually not dangerous at all. It's really all about getting those interrupts right, and the reality is most of the mobs here don't really do much. And we are free to use wings here since we are gonna get pretty easy pack afterwards too. It's gonna be Blightbacks, and then it's gonna be the big guys that also like throw meat, and there's a big guy with the mid shield and stuff. So here we're pretty free to just use whatever cooldowns we want, just go ham and add some damage real quick. Now we don't really care too much, or we're not really scared about this pack whatsoever. Now, the next pack though, as I said, it's not that dangerous, but you still gotta be wary about the meat, throw meat, because even though on its own it's not that big of a threat, it can happen that the guys that are throwing the meat can line up and potentially almost one-shot somebody in these high keys. So here you'll see how, there you go, Hunttober. The hunter just almost got one shot because both guys were throwing meat at him. And this happens repeatedly, but you'll see right there, the other hunter also takes a big chunk of damage. And that's because those throw meats are being lined up on the same person over and over. So it's a good idea sometimes to actually like stun them and try to desync the throw meats just in case. But other than that, we want to try and push through this pack without really using anything, because we want to have everything up for the rifle that will come right after, since we are also pulling a Blightback pack that's patrolling around. Now, just in case, we don't want to pick up the spear right behind us, just in case the rifle doesn't go right. But anyhow, now we get into the rifle, we should have wings up, and here we're playing with Awakening, it is, yeah, I think it's Awakening, and Divine Purpose. We have a pretty rough start on this rifle because the lines were like hidden behind the rifle and I couldn't see them on the bear, so pretty rough start right there, 2 people die. But we go right back in, we pop wings and we kinda catch up right here. Yeah, it's basically a pretty rough start for this kind of rifle. We are gonna have Debo up and Divine Toll coming right up, so we can even things out. DPS is not that bad, so looks like we popped cooldowns on this guy. We try to do our best to simply try and World of Glory people up, since we can't really count on people stacking at this point, since Sifrin is being so messy. But we fight through it, we get some immunities rolling, and even despite the fuck-ups, we end up being able to push through it. Now at this point we're thinking, okay, this key is over, we just fucked up so much, we just had 3 days right there. But we're still in the game, we're still fine, we got the rifle buff, and we're gonna go right in and pop our Kyrian Steward right here, and use it to get the orbs. So on this boss we're gonna be using the spear we just picked up after the rifle, and together with the orbs, or rather the Kyrian buff and the rifle, we should be able to melt this boss. I mean, ideally you wouldn't have wiped that much, or like almost wiped on the rifle, so you could have a bit more duration on the rifle, or rather the rifle buff. But anyhow, this boss usually melts, and it's a pretty simple boss. Nothing to really talk about here, healing wise. Mostly it's just about stacking on him with the buff, of course if you're running a Kyrian, that is, because the damage from those 2 buffs just melt him, especially using the spear right here. So usually I just pop wings as soon as I have them, just for damage, and usually just keep Divine Toll in case something goes wrong, but it's very rarely the case, so long as people don't stack. You see here the guy who got the target on him, he just goes to a corner and basically gets the bomb on him solo. And we just wanna either CC these guys, the worms, or we just you know, binding shot them and just move out. We don't wanna have them meleeing people and actually getting stacked, because they might then blow up and do actually a lot of damage. this boss goes on and on, we're gonna be running out of space, so we wanna try and kite towards where we came from. Since this room, even though it's huge, it's actually pretty easy to pull something, and if you pull something in the middle, you're pretty much gonna wipe instantly, since it's gonna aggro to the whole party. But anyhow, you have quite a lot of room so long as you actually properly use the buffs right there, the Kyrian buff and the Pryphle buff. And then we just go here into this big ass pack, which actually is pretty much the same as the pack we just did before getting the Pryphle. There's quite some soldiers right here, and there's especially these two guys which are gonna be again throwing flesh. So it's pretty much the same situation as we had before. It's a easy pack so long as the guys don't line up, they throw flesh on one person and they blow him up. So yeah, so long as that doesn't happen, we're pretty much chilling in this pack. Usually use wings for adding damage mainly here, because we're not really gonna need them in the next pack. Since next pack is gonna be actually pretty much cheesed with the buff from the Kyrian guy right there. Now as we come to the second Kyrian big boy right here, we're gonna have, we can face some potential issues if we took too long after killing the boss, or rather after like activating the first Goliath and getting here, because the Steward guy might have despawned and then we might not have it up, the cooldown might not be up. So this is what happens in this scenario. We realize that we don't have the Kyrian boy app for summoning, so we instead decide to pull these two guys just on their own. But ideally we would have rather gotten the buff from the Goliath and then pull these two guys together with the Necromancer at the same time as we are trying to CC the mages, of course, since we don't want those casting around. But in this case we just kill these two guys and then wait it off for a couple seconds here until the guy can be summoned. So as we see, he's coming right off of cooldown, and we just click on him and get the orbs. Now it's important to notice, I am pretty annoyed by this guy just running around, because sometimes I right click on him accidentally and then he like shows the dialogue window pops up and stuff. So it's important to notice that if you actually try to dismiss this guy before he actually finishes like repairing the Goliath, he might actually he actually despawns and you don't get him to actually finish the repair. So you are pretty screwed in that regard, so don't do that. It happened to me once. Again, now this pack is false over, as I said, we get the buff again, and this guy is pretty easy. There really is. You should only really be paying attention to the guys that are being summoned. Might be one of those might be a mage. So if that's the case, we're just gonna CC them. And then we go to this Pryphle, which is again also pretty free, because the buff that we get from the Kyrian guy pretty much destroys him and does all the DPS that we need. And it also heals up pretty much heals up the entire party. So right here we just go into it and actually pop wings and all, because we just want to add as much as possible, get as many uses of wings as we can get, so long as we don't really rely on them for the next pack. Which is not really the case coming up here, because even though the next pack is not the easiest one, we don't want to pick the orb yet, just in case, because we might get some problems in this pack if like mistakes are made. But the only mistakes that can happen are really like pretty stupid stuff, like standing on the frontal, or like a cast going through. Maybe the pool, like one of those Necromancer summons. You see the pool right there, the green stuff, that does a lot of damage. They can like two-shot if you stand on it. So usually it's a pretty chill pack, so long as the casts are being interrupted. Because right there you see the tank gets a big shield, like a big absorb shield. I use Divine Toll just to top him up, just in case, because those other two guys are actually doing quite some damage to him. But right after that we just go and pick up the orb. And then we use our skip strat right here. We just use the gateway instead of using like an invis spot or whatever. Because we are going to be using... no, actually no, we sometimes use an invis spot in this part, like after these two guys and the Necromancer to the left. But instead we're just going to be going into these two guys right here. Which in this case, we didn't have any cooldowns, because happens that we popped them on the pack before. And we kind of struggled a bit here, because we don't really DPS the shield down. Like we're struggling to make this little DPS check on the shields to get the guys to die instantly. So we're just gonna be trying like pushing through this Slugfest, like slowly, steadily trying not to get the tank killed from those frontals. We also get some gas going through, which is pretty fucking bad. Like it looked pretty grim at this point. It looked like we were not gonna be making this, but eventually we pushed through it. We just gotta focus one of the guys and get the cooldowns back up. You don't really need the cooldowns afterwards. Like healing wise here, so long as nobody stands on the frontals, there shouldn't really be any issue. Just focus the tank and hope the tank doesn't get one shot. Usually if you were probably playing with like a Vengeance Demon Hunter here, it could have been very sketchy and the guy would probably have had to like run away or something. And of course you cannot really run far away because there's mobs in front and backwards, so it's kind of sketchy if this ever happens to you. But luckily we managed to push through it. We eventually get both shields right here. And we just go to the next pack. Which is gonna be again one of those Necromancer packs that the big guys summon stuff. So here again we're gonna have one of the mages. We're just gonna CC the one guy with a trap. And then we're gonna wanna DPS this guy just a little bit. Just to add some damage while like the guy is still very healthy. And once he's like down to like 50% or so, we're gonna try to move backwards and use our Steward. And hopefully he's not despawned, because if that's the case, like actually in this key it happened to us again. We had the Steward despawn again, because he despawns whenever he's like been up for 3 minutes, he goes away. So again we get the ability to summon him again. It's back on cooldown, so we gotta wait for like 30 seconds here before we can actually use the Goliath. Usually if this is the case, you should probably just run forward and like skip it, but we were kind of relying on this buff to cheese the next pack, so we don't really have a choice. We just gotta wait here until the buff, like the ability is back up. Might be a good idea to keep an eye on that. I'm not actually tracking this on my weak auras, which is actually pretty bad, because if I knew that he was gonna like despawn, I could just have run forward and like get the buff earlier. I don't want to get the buff straight away, because sometimes you get it too early and like then it despawns, or it just runs out before you make it to the next pack, or people simply like forget about picking it up or whatever. So I usually rather try and like cheese it like as the mob before is dying, but sometimes you can't help it and you gotta go through like this kind of situations or ordeals where you gotta wait for almost a minute wasted right here. At this point we're pretty worried. We're like thinking, okay, we've lost so much time, we have so many deaths, but we know this dungeon is pretty easily, like you can actually cheese it pretty easily, so long as you like play around the buffs and the items. So right now we have a spear that we picked up behind us, and we also have a hammer. So we're gonna be going to this pack with the buff, and we're just gonna be using the orb we also picked up after the first Necromancer back there, and we're just gonna be destroying this pack with both like the buff and the orb. Should fall over, and then we get the rifle. Now this rifle again, since we have the buff, there really is not much healing required to be done here. So for this reason I just use wings in the pack right before this rifle, because we're just gonna be getting as much damage as possible, going as quick as possible through this dungeon, since so long as you play around the objects and the buffs, you can pretty much cheese this entire dungeon until you get to the upper zone of it. So yeah, as we see, people are stacking around the rifle right here. This is pretty much the ideal situation where you don't want like people to be hitting, of course, getting hit by the lines, but of course want to keep on getting back in despite the quaking, so that we get those little ticks of the buff running through the rifle, and then he basically just melts. Now the next couple packs are pretty chill. I mean, this pack and the next one, the tank might have some issues here, and the next like those two guys that apply the debuff. My tank has sometimes asked for Bob here to remove the bleed if he's like kiting and like, you know, he gets destroyed by the little guys, but right here we had cooldowns and stuff, so we just go ham. Luckily we're running Awakening in this dungeon, so we're getting pretty lucky with the procs right here, just because of like we want to add some damage. I'm not sure if if Awakening was the right call for this dungeon, but overall, so long as you get lucky, it's always, you know, it's always beneficial over Sanctified Wrath if the RNG gods are on your favor. Now right here we want to CC both mages, of course, we don't want those guys going through. And I also try and CC the one guy that he's shooting, because we might have the same situation as with the guys that do the throw mid spell. If they line up on the same guy, you know, the two marksman or snipers, I don't know what they're called, you might have one guy or like potentially getting one shot right here. Also, it's important to notice that if you're gonna be using Tarn Evil on one of those guys, if he runs too far away and the Necromancer dies, like the big guy, he will not die. So like the guy who will run away, he will still stay alive, and then he will have a buff on him preventing him from like actually getting killed, because he constantly regenerates health. So if that happens, you might just have to either wipe it or use one of the hammers on him. That might actually be a pretty big waste, because you know you want these hammers for this guy. We just want to annihilate this guy because of the high damage that he actually does. So right here we have the spear we just picked up right on the like 2 packs before jumping over the bridge and engaging the Necromancer pack we just did. We popped that spear. I'm not sure if we popped one of the hammers here. I'm pretty sure we used one of them on the rifle, so simply because of the extra damage. So we might actually not have a hammer for this guy, but if you do and you didn't use it for the rifle, you can also use it on this guy if you're like you think that you're gonna be struggling with healing. Usually this guy is pretty chill since they like changed it. They before the changes used to be ramping up infinitely, right? So he would always get the buff and he would never drop, and he would just ramp up potentially infinitely. But right now it's basically been made easier since he doesn't really get like this ticking damage or above like when he actually becomes dangerous until he actually soaks the guy. So basically we engage this guy and we just want to save wings until he actually soaks the first adds. And once that happens, it's usually not that high of a damage. You know, the ticket damage is dangerous, but it's usually nothing too scary. So long as we cycle through the cooldowns appropriately, we should be chilling. In this case, I used Debo just as the ticket damage started, because why not? I don't know. I might as well try it just in case it's kind of crazy. So I want to play it safe here and use Debo with the first set of wings. And now the buff on him has already dropped off, so the ticket damage has stopped. We keep on trying to get the ads CC'd, especially the mages. You can also try and CC the marksmans or like the guys that shoot at you. You can Tarn Evil those, because in this case we have 2 traps, so we can actually CC 3 guys. But right there we faced like we had an issue where one of the guys didn't get CC'd because the two of the skeleton guys spawned at the same spot, so one of the traps missed, and we had to like actually like try and get a hotch right at the end so that he didn't blow up and actually insta kill us. So that was pretty clutch. But yeah, this boss, like, we just keep on cycling through the cooldowns. Right there we had the second set of ticking damage after he soaked the last set of ads, and we just used Divine Soul through that one. We got lucky and we got a proc of Awakening, so the damage never really gets very scary here. But if you potentially get to like 3 phases, or like cycle through 3 phases of soaking or like sucking in the ads, you might say, it can actually get a pretty substantially difficult if like you are running low on cooldowns and you are running, you know, you don't have you're not running Awakening, so you don't get any procs. You might actually face a mission right there, but again, so long as you try and cycle through these like cooldowns and like stagger them a bit, it's usually fine. It, of course, it's one of these bosses where you're not going to be able to get people stacked, so you're going to have to rely on Word of Glory overall. You're not going to be able to use Light of Dawn much to its strength right there. Now, coming up to this big ass part of the dungeon, the upper platform. It's basically the part where you usually spend the most time. Not in this case though, because we had such a rough like early like start of the dungeon. But right here we just go into it. We're just gonna. I like to pop wings early on since, you know, these spare parts can actually do quite some damage, and I don't really need them. Like, I don't think they're that necessary for like the big patrol that's gonna come up, because after the big patrol we are actually gonna be getting another rifle, and we definitely want to be having wings for the up for that rifle. So at least for this route, I think it's a good idea to just pop the wings here, add some damage, and heal to that spare part damage, because those spare parts fixate on people, and then therefore the tank cannot do anything. But also this pack is kind of cheesy, of course, because you got these throw cleaver guys, right? So kind of depends on you know, how you're feeling, and well, while like pulling this patrol here, how your tank is feeling, how squishy is it. I wouldn't advise though. I would definitely advise against using wings with this guy, because you definitely need them. In my opinion, you would definitely need them for the rifle coming after. So right here we just had one of the casts going through, Luckily I did have Divine Toll for that one, so it's basically like mass Leon Hands and everybody gets stopped off through the debuff. But in many cases, if that happens, you're usually screwed and it's basically a wipe. Although on this pool, it actually happens again, and we have 2 of those going out. Like, we almost actually lose the spear, and that's pretty much over, right? Because we still have 1 spear on us, and we want to use that one for like this boss, like the 3rd boss, because we pretty much choose them. We almost like one face him. But we actually managed to push through this despite like this cast going off right here. Wings are coming right up, and I still hold on to them because I know if I use wings right here, we are pretty much wiping to the rifle. Luckily though, I do get a proc of awakening right there, so this is what I mean with like awakening being this, you know, it's such a blessing when you like are actually struggling with healing like the bags in between the like in between rifles. You know, if you actually like are struggling and your comp is not actually executing things cleanly, running awakening can actually save the day in many ways. But then again, now coming to this rifle, if I was using awakening and this was like a higher key, or I was like struggling a bit more on it, running awakening instead of Sanctified Wrath, really like it's really noticeable when it comes down to like the rifle healing. Now in the case of this rifle, it's a pretty standard one. We just go into it with pretty much almost all our cooldowns. Divine Toll should be coming up like at the end of the rifle, almost, if this was gonna be a slow one. But it's not the case, since we are gonna be getting the rifle buff right after this. What we usually do here is everybody pops cooldowns, like DPS cooldowns, and we basically melt the pack right afterwards with the rifle buff with the orb. So right there, I didn't have Divine Toll, you saw. It was actually kind of clutch because of that. If I was running Sanctified Wrath, that's what I mean, I would probably have actually not have died right there, or everything would have been a bit cleaner, because getting those extra holy shocks during the rifle, during the space of the wings buff, is actually massive, and it makes a huge difference on the rifle healing. It really does. But yeah, now we're just coming into this pack. You see the Guardian Druid is actually destroying this pack. He just used the orb with like the rifle buff, and of course 30% extra damage is just basically destroying these guys. So yeah, that's basically why we are free to actually use cooldowns on the rifle without really being too worried about falling behind in time and stuff. But yeah, now coming right off into this pack, there is no rifle in the horizon. The next one coming up is gonna be after this pack, and then there's like 2 more packs. So we're gonna be getting it like wings after this pack. We should be free to use them on the next pack. That's what I usually do. Now, since this guy was actually going for a little longer than I could actually expect, we just pop wings right here and basically make our lives easier by having extra tank damage. It is, you know, it's the average pack. Like these big guys usually are not that big of a threat, but of course you can get if the tank misplays, it can be a pretty big disaster. And right here we're definitely not like looking good on time, so we can definitely not afford to have the tank damage, like the tank die and actually lose the spear. That would definitely mean the key is over. But of course we go into these 2 guys which basically kill each other, so so long as you get the cleavers into them, they really are not a threat, and therefore we could spare the wings out like in the pack before. It's completely fine. Now this the fixate ability, you can actually just bob the person who gets it. You can bob yourself if you want to, so long as it's a hunter, of course. They can feign death or whatever. But it's a good idea to keep them in the same spot, so it's easier to land the cleavers and like AoE them down and stuff. It's something I always try to do. You just either bob the person who is fixated, so long as they cannot use an immunity, or bob myself if I get it on me. Just to be quick with the fixate stuff, you can either watch the, you can either watch the debuff on the frames right there. You see when I get fixated, there's a debuff on my frames on me. But since that debuff doesn't go on like on the person until like the guy is actually fixating, it's a good idea to target him and like look at the target of his next spell, like whenever he's actually casting the Fixate, just in case the person is on melee and he gets one shot. Now coming into this next pack, it's kind of the same situation as like the previous Stitchware pack we just did before the two other guys. This is really not a threat so long as the tank is actually handling himself okay-ish. So we just use wings. I usually use wings on this pack just since, you know, makes our life easier and adds damage. But we definitely, you know, it might not be the ideal choice, but the next pack, because the next pack coming right after actually kind of stings, right? It is the guy that does AoE damage around him, because it's like a cloud of like poison or whatever. And I'm really tempted sometimes to actually use wings on that pack because it can get pretty hectic and like it can be pretty rough, especially since if you are playing like people who are like stacked up, or like we are playing a lot of melees and like they're getting all the dot on them, or like people get cleaved by like the spew, whatever that's called. It might actually get pretty hectic on that pack, but I would really advise against actually using wings on that one, because, you know, we are getting Prideful right after, and again, you just saw how tight it was without having Divine Toll. So at this key level, not having wings, it's pretty much a death sentence. This guy is also pretty easy, and this pack in general, so long as you dodge those frontals. But as you can see, it gets pretty sketchy on the tank, and we're still having the spears on him, so we cannot afford this guy to die whatsoever. And yeah, we get into this pack, and as I said before, I'm kind of reluctant to go into melee with this guy because of the, you know, the AoE damage that's going on. Although it doesn't feel that, you know, so long as you are going in and out a bit and like not overdoing it, it doesn't feel that bad. Like it's not that hard, but it's a very good idea to not sit on melee with this guy just in case, because if you were to be just a little bit lower, like just down to 80% health, I might have just gotten one shot right there with a Spew Disease. You see again, I almost get one shot right there. Luckily the guy turns around, so you can like actually see if he's like fixating you pretty easily. And you can also of course watch like the target of target frame. But if you were like actually sitting on him and just chilling on melee, taking all the damage to the face, it's pretty easy to actually get one shot. That's one of the reasons why like it's actually a pretty scary pack. Right there, as you see, I was down to 50%, but somehow I didn't get one shot. I had to use the laying hands on me. But we actually managed to push through it without using wings, and now we have every single cooldown coming into this Prideful, which is actually still pretty scary, since I said before, because we are still running Awakening, and you know, I like it on some dungeons, but Awakening in general, I don't think it's the play as soon as you start pushing high keys, simply because, as I said before, Sanctified Wrath really makes these Prideful's way smoother. Now right here we use cooldowns on the Hunter, so he's actually going down pretty quickly. We even have, you know, Devo and Divine Toll. We just use Divine Toll right there to keep things steady. And we should actually be using Devo right here, just because things might get pretty sketchy. As you see right there, and they actually do, the tank actually dies because he gets hit by one of the lines. But we actually agreed and hold on to it. I don't think there's a reason to hold on to Devo at that point, since this boss is pretty much gonna melt. Because right here we just pop him, he comes back down when we land the hook, and we basically throw the spear at him, and he just gets melted and destroyed. Now I'd like to point out it's a good idea to not stand in front of him. For some reason I liked standing like wherever the hook was supposed to be going. Just because I don't know, I like to take it like safe and like stand there and like don't have to do it last second. But if you actually stand wherever the hook is supposed to be going, you're probably baiting the green stuff down on the ground right there. So it's a good idea not to do that and like stand on the side. But as we see right here, the guy's already melted. He pretty much gets instantly blown up by like the spear and everybody using cooldowns with the Prideful buff. And we actually saved Bloodlust here too. But just in case if the guy was going to actually escape, it's of course you should always be aiming the last spear, or rather the hook, back to the stage. So if he jumps, he gets like pulled right after or right away. So for that case, it's a very good idea to actually like not kill the first Stitchware, just so that you can actually use him again if that happens. And now we actually head into the final boss right here. Now this fight, I did it once on, you know, what you call Grievous, right? So on Grievous, this fight is actually really hard, since it drags on for so long, and you can actually get really high stacks of the like the shield debuff, the debuff that gets applied whenever the shield ticks, if it's not like actually removed. If that is the case, this fight is actually really hard. So since that happened to me once, that we did this fight and we basically almost wiped, and I was actually pretty scared of this boss. I decided that the way to go with this boss was like to actually hold on to my cooldowns for as long as possible, and try to actually grid them out so that they are like really like a panic button kind of deal. So I'm holding on to wings here instead of using them for damage. But I realized that this is actually not the play right here, because we're actually very tight on time, and we really need the damage right here. So since this is a very safe boss, I would really advise to, you know, you make the call. Do you feel like you are gonna need the damage? Do you feel like are you gonna be struggling with healing? You can kind of make the call here. So long as you are fine with the time, I would advise to actually hold on to wings here, just because, you know, you never know when the like DPS are gonna not be not have the cooldowns. Whenever one of the DPS that was supposed to be using cooldowns gets like casted away or like thrown to the sides of the platform here, what you call it's called Dark Exile, right? So sometimes the shields can actually get pretty scuffed and actually get to like 4 stacks. So if that's the case, you will always be grateful if you actually save your cooldowns, especially if this was gonna be you know, a Grievous week. So that's what I do right here. I got the Divine Toll up right there, but instead I choose like not to use it at all, like just try and grid through it. Just keep it as a just in case button. For the most part, this is a fight where you can actually add a lot of damage. What I try to do with my tank is we run, you know, the tank is standing on one side of the boss and I'm standing on the opposite side, and we both run to the left so that we never drop the meteor, like the comet thingies on top of each other, and we can always stand on melee. Now the melee uptime on the boss really adds up, and eventually the damage is really noticeable if you manage to like do it cleanly. Now of course you can always use freedom to remove the debuff that roots the person in place. It's actually the best thing to do just because of the mana that you save with it. Freedom is actually much more mana efficient than using an actual dispel. Of course you don't want your DPS to actually be using a GCD on like disengage or any other cooldown that might actually free them. You'd rather be the one using that freedom to actually like potentially increase the damage of the whole party. And at this point the boss is just pretty much dead. We're still kind of panicking because, you know, the timer is like 20 seconds away. We get one last shield. Everybody gets very low, but as soon as that shield is broken, the boss just dies and it's over. So yeah, that's the end of the key. It was a pretty rough run because you know, we actually had a pretty rough start, but again we managed to recover. So long as you actually make like a proper use of the items that you find along the dungeon, and so you actually rely on them properly. This key is actually one of the easiest ones to actually time, and it's not that rough on the healing. Hopefully the tips that I like, or the things that I mentioned throughout the different aspects and parts of the dungeon are helpful to you. And yeah, hope you enjoyed that one, and see you next time.